at all. Well, that's good. Sweet. All right, so while we're waiting for our person to get on here, I will share something up here. So this is our guest for the morning.
So it usually looks like this. Welcome from the office. It's a little messy, so don't get too much time.
Because TV is Kris Williams. And all her glamour.
We are here today because you guys sent in some great questions, and I'm really excited to actually get to answer them. So here goes.
She's very much not single. All right, Kris, if you want to start with the mini DV and the thermal. Now, when you're listening to this and watching the video there, we need to pay close attention for the shadows, sounds of footsteps, full body apparition. Okay.
Monthly and Mike. I've always had a belief in hauntings and ghosts and paranormal. It's always been a subject that we've talked about in my family. My mom grew up in a house that was very active. I've had experiences of my own, and a lot of situations that happened over the last year actually finally got me into it. It's weird because I always had my beliefs of ghosts and hauntings, but when it actually came to thinking about death, I never really thought of like going somewhere else or living somewhere else or having another life. Last year, we had 5 people pass away. My grandfather had Alzheimer's, my mom's aunt had cancer, a friend of ours accidentally OD'd. My uncle had a heart attack, and another cousin had a heart attack. So it wasn't until I lost all those people that I realized my 2 beliefs kind of contradicted each other, and that's partly why I'm here. All right, right now the temperature is 52.4. Can you drop it down to 45 for us? I have not worked with any other paranormal group. This is, the first time I've done anything like this, and I'd say a big part of the reason why I got involved, my own interest in general, but I've also been a friend of Jason Grant forever, and I've tried to get involved many times over the years, but schedule-wise, it never seemed to work out. I had school, or I had work, or I had whatever, and with the guys, it wasn't something I was doing regularly, so they'd have an investigation one weekend, and I'd have school or work or family stuff, and then they wouldn't have something when I was available. So this was the first time things worked out and fell into place.
Anyone in here besides Chris's stomach? Demonic stomach.
Hey, L.I. Fear Stalker. Actually, I think I get picked on just as much as everybody else. I've known Jane Grant the longest, so they tend to pick on me like a little sister. I'm used to it.
I'll let you go on a long seat to get anything.
I'm already freaking myself out.
That's right. What kind of coffee do you want?
Really no big deal. And I'm pretty good at taking attacks, so it's never really been a problem.
What's that? Not only I'm talking.
But that was her profession back a few years ago. Let's see. I guess now we are just waiting for her to call in. 4:30 in the morning. Do that. So hopefully she will not oversleep or flake on us, but nice of her to offer. So her story, I guess I'll give you like a little preface while we're waiting, is that after she was done with the TV shows, so after this first one, then she wound up doing an international one, and then when she was done with the TV show stuff, she wound up getting in a relationship with this dude who at first seemed like really like attentive and nice and supportive, and just like basically showered her with attention. And she started to realize after a while that she kind of got isolated from her friends and her family. And after some time, he was just downright emotionally abusive in terms of like she couldn't do anything without his permission. And it sort of all happened gradually. So it's like when you're in these bad relationships, you don't realize it until you're deep into it. And you know, after doing some research, she realized, oh wow, that like she discovered that he was a clinical narcissist. It was before people were talking about gaslighting. Has anybody ever heard the term gaslighting? I guess people know what that is now. It's like a thing. But like, you know, back then we didn't realize that people could make us think we're the crazy ones when they're acting a certain way. And then now you're like deep in the relationship. She was in it for 8 years and eventually was able to pull herself out, and you know, is now trying to sort of advocate for people to recognize these things before you get stuck in them. So that's why I think it's particularly good to be able to have her come and talk to either college students or, you know, you guys, because you're kind of like right at that level where you could wind up in bad relationships. So that's that thing at this point. Just waiting. Yeah. And
Is it one of the guys on the show?
it was not one of the guys on the show. I think they were all flirting with her. Yeah, she was. It was like a bunch of guys, and then her, and she was pretty attractive. And well, that's an interesting. I wonder if she ever did have any. I don't think she had dated anybody on the show. Usually it's when I have my fictions people come in that I'm left holding the bag. I've been flaked out on a couple times there. It's actually a picture. We played Coatesville last night, and did you? Oh yeah, we destroyed them. I was surprised to see. Well, Hannah was the only good person on the team, and she was setting, which was weird. I didn't know that. Yeah, she was very good. It has to be frustrating for her because it was like so bad, and their libero was just hideous. So it's like it's a shame. Yeah,
That's good. We've been a little too hyped for my teams. I'm excited to play them. I think we'll look good.
When is it again?
Friday. It's a night game.
Friday the 7th. All right. I have to get you my tips on how to beat them, because there's definitely a couple of. They have one good player, like Olivia Slavecki, I think her name is, and like otherwise there's just a whole bunch of holes you can take advantage of. Yeah. I knew. I don't think they were good up front at all. I feel like that was like one of their big weaknesses. Yeah, it's a shame. Liv McLean went to this St. Joe's, which is where we do the like CYO program. So we knew her, but I don't know. She's not the best. She's just a nice kid.
So are the questions graded? Like the questions?
Would you want to write it down?
Test, oh, these? No. This is mostly it's just I wanted to be prepared, because like when you're in the moment trying to think of a question, a lot of times it's hard. So I figure if you had it written down, it's easier to like, know.
No, no, sort of bounce ahead and share to
Well, no, I'll know that you've asked the question. And even if you don't get a chance to ask, as long as I know that you've had the question available, because I know we only have so much time and she'll be doing her thing as well. I just wanted to make sure she didn't not have any questions available. I know, I think that may be the case. I don't have. Yeah. It's 450. Everybody gonna think I'm a liar. Oh. That was my fault. I guess I forgot to send her the new link. Bad, Jeff. There we go. That was my bad.
Oh.
Oh, okay. I'm only 5 minutes late though. All right. So she got on it. Well, she messaged me at 7:30, but only 5 minutes later than we were supposed to have started. Good. Hey, Kris. Sorry.
You're okay.
That was
You're okay.
my.
I didn't know if I did something wrong on my end.
No. We just all figured you were decided to sleep because it's way too early where you are.
It is early, but no, I've been up since about 4.
Oh, nice. Yes, you look very put together for
Yeah.
4 in the morning. I'm impressed.
Oh.
And the connection's better. Okay, so yeah, I could step away from here so you can see everybody.
Morning,
just-
guys.
Let me see if I
Hi.
can turn the sound on.
Off your computer.
Okay. All right. So I just did a brief introduction for everybody, so that they know a little bit about who you are without any of the, gory details or anything.
Because there are many.
But yeah. So introductions are there. I will now pass it along to you, and you can tell your story. Everybody has questions available, so if
Okay.
you get stuck at some
Okay.
point and you just want to take a question and regroup, that's good. And hey, it's all yours.
Okay. Yeah, so my experience with it's unfortunate there's a lot of people like myself that get stuck in patterns of dealing with the same type of people, and you can be stuck in them for a long period of time until you realize what you're doing or what you're attracting or what you're putting up with. And unfortunately for me, the pattern that I've been stuck in is one with people that commit what is called narcissistic abuse. It is very sneaky. It's one of those things where, growing up in all the way from kindergarten all the way up to high school, or through high school, college, we're always taught about physical abuse, sexual abuse, how to spot it. And obviously those things are very in your face usually. So I had experiences when I was a teen with one guy who was physically abusive. And when that happened, it's like, this man should not be hitting me. I'm out. It's very clear when somebody is, a jerk in that way. It's very in your face. It's not hard to miss. However, with narcissistic abuse, it's very different. It's mental, it's emotional, it can be sexual, it's financial. It's kind of like the complete hollowing out of a person. It's like going day to day once you're far enough into it, feeling like an empty shell or an empty vessel, like there's just, you flatlined. So typically when it starts, it's they kind of hit on two different tactics to kind of reel you in. One is called, or is known as mirroring. So I don't know if you guys have ever met somebody and you're like, oh my God, we have so much in common. We like all the same things. We're into all the same hobbies. We have, similar friends or similar likes, or, you feel this instant connection with somebody. So you're talking to them and you might be like, I love this type of, horror movies or whatever. And they're like, oh, me too. I like hiking on the weekends. Oh, me too. Everything that you put out there, they are taking from what you're putting out and they're reflecting it back at you. So you think you've made this instant connection, this instant friendship, you've met your soulmate. You feel like you've met your person. But the other thing they do at the same time is they do this thing called love bombing. And what it is on top of mirroring you and making you feel like this is somebody you just instantly connected with. And they do that to establish a trust with you that is instant. They want you to trust them right away. So that's part of the mirroring. But then the other part with the love bombing is they're giving you all of their time. They're giving you all of their attention. Love bombing can also include gifts. It's just everything you ever wanted from a person on an attention level, on an affection level, like you're getting all of it. You're getting bombarded with it. So it's just, you're overwhelmed with this feeling like you've met your perfect person. You met the one. And then once they've kind of got their hooks in, and the dynamic will change at some point. And when the dynamic changes, all bets are off. The person that you were first introduced to, over time, you'll gradually learn was never real and they never existed. It was just a complete and utter front to reel you in. And when that dynamic changes, you are so wrapped up in that person. You are so wrapped up in that friendship, because this happens in friendships too. You're so wrapped up in that relationship, or it could be, there's this close relationship with a coworker or something. You're completely and utterly blindsided, and you're left confused and dazed and unsure of what just happened. And if you're anything like me, or others who I've met who've dealt with this, instead of being like, clearly there's something wrong with this person, you take it more like, what did I do wrong? I don't understand how this flipped so quickly. Clearly I must have done something, but they're not communicating anything with me. And all the answers they give me are very vague, or they instantly will start turning on you. So everything's your fault. You didn't do things right, but they don't give you clear cut explanations or reasoning. They just leave you in a constant state of confusion. So for me, with my ex-husband, the dynamic switch was, I had married a man who lived overseas, but before we married, part of me moving there was I'd have to pull myself out of work here. So I was partially living with my parents at that point, and then when I would go over to Australia where he lived, I would live with him. So the way the visas worked was I could go over there for 3 months max. I'd have to come home for at least 2 weeks. So what would happen is I'd go out there for 1 to 3 months. I'd come back for 1 to 4 months to go back out for 1 to 3 months. And when I was there, I couldn't legally work. And when I was here, I wasn't here long enough to find anything substantial that would pay me okay, that would put up with me being here and me being away. So the big dynamic switch for us was financial. I was now financially dependent on him until we got me moved out there. Now, Up until that point, they're very quick to talk marriage. They're very quick to talk kids and future. This is another thing that they call future faking. They want everything with you and they want it yesterday. But as soon as that dynamic switched, as soon as he was now financially responsible for things and he had control in that department, and my finances were completely dwindling, the entire thing switched on his head. Oh, I don't want to get married. Oh, it won't be good for my kid. Oh, I'm not interested. And I'd be like, okay, fine, I'll go back to work. Oh, but you're everything. You're everything I ever wanted. I can't wait for us to get married. I can't wait for you to move here. Okay, so then you're back on board until they put the brakes on again. So that's this constant cycle of pushing and pulling, constant cycle of leaving you confused. And then it kind of moves into a phase of them just tearing you down. These little comments every day that are relentless. And then after a while, you feel entirely like you've lost your personality. You've lost your loves and interests. It's like your personality and everything you are eventually just kind of gets erased, and you're just, like I said earlier, you're just like a kind of a shell moving through life. And I remember it was very weird because towards the end of it for me, I would wake up in the morning mad that I woke up, and I would go to bed hoping I wouldn't wake up. And that was my life for quite a while once I moved over there. So it's just, honestly, and I wouldn't want anybody to hit me. That was not a fun relationship either, but I almost preferred that one over this one because at least that one was very clear. As soon as somebody puts your hands on you, you're out. Where this one, you start with somebody who you feel is like your everything, your person, your soulmate, whatever you want to call it, that we're all kind of told about growing up, and they end up being your worst nightmare. they're awful, and they're so hard to get away with or from. So for me, in order to leave, I couldn't tell him. Because had he known I wanted to leave, then they put you right back up on the pedestal. You're everything. They want you, that they need you, like you can't leave them. And it turns into this very crazy game of cat and mouse. So I actually had to leave for him to wait to go on a work trip. And I packed 2 bags and I just quietly left. And then I had to cut all ties because they're very good at talking you back in. And the only way to get away from them 100% is to cut them off in all areas, social, phones, any way they're able to contact you. It might even be cutting off friends, because they'll use friends to kind of come in and be like, oh, he's such a good guy, or she's such a good girl, and they're such a great person, and I think you're being a little too hard on them. Meanwhile, they don't know what's going on inside the relationship or the friendship. They're not seeing that other side of that person, because that person is they're so good at putting on a mask. They don't want anybody outside their inner circle to see what they really are. And when you're in a very close relationship with these types of people, the only way you're going to see the cracks is if you're close enough to them. And that's the other thing I like to stress to people a lot is when I talk about this online, people are like, oh yeah, guys are horrible, guys this, guys that. It's not just guys. Women are fully capable of committing this too. This isn't about strength, physical strength. It's about mental, emotional, financial, sexual. It's can be committed by both sexes. So it's something even the guys have to be careful of, because it's devastating. It's absolutely devastating. The other component with it, like I've said a couple times, can be sexual. As far as when I left, I found out that there were at least 6 other women he'd been with during our relationship that I had no idea. The distance between us definitely would have helped his situation, but he also had a job that had him on the road a lot. And this wasn't like one night flings. He was with one girl for 1.5 years while he was with me. He was with 2 other girls for 6 months while he was with me. They're very good storytellers. They're very good liars. They're very good manipulators. They are just a force to be reckoned with. And when you do figure them out, they tend to lash back. They will throw all kinds of things out there that are not true to kind of destroy you and your reputation, because the last thing they want is anybody discovering what it is that they've done to you. And then they'll move on to the next person and they'll repeat and start the same cycle. They're very quick to discard people once they become bored with you. And I think that's one of the harder things to deal with, is it isn't you. It doesn't matter who they're with. They're going to get bored. They're going to get rid of you. And you know, as soon as they find something else that's giving them or feeding them that attention that they need, whatever that thing is. So it's hard to not take it personally, because if you're the person on the abused end of this, you're leveled. You're utterly just leveled and starting over. And they just seem to go on their merry way, and they pick up the next person and they dismantle them. So it's one of those deals where, as upset and as mad as I was, I think what I was freaked out about the most when it stopped for me was the fact that he was going to do it to someone else. The one somewhat bright side to it was the girls that he had set up while he was with me. We had all made contact with each other, and it was just nice to meet the other ladies who I in no way would ever consider stupid. No way. They were very smart, very intelligent. They're good people. And I think we were all able to kind of bond in that way, because it's easy to feel dumb because you fell for it. But they're just highly skilled at being manipulators. But yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot. And I threw a lot at you guys right now. Do you anybody have any questions so far? Or? Yeah.
Well, either there, you can kind of come up so she can see your lovely face. This is India.
Morning.
I've got a lot of signs of like abuse. So for like narcissistic abuse, so what were your like first three, if you had any? Because I know there's a bunch, but what were your first three specifically?
What were what? I'm sorry.
Your first three signs of like in your relationship narcissistic abuse.
Their words and their actions don't match up. You know, you really have to pay attention. There will be a lot of red flags, but I think for a lot of people, you want to give people the benefit of the doubt, and you're like, oh, they didn't really mean that, or they're having a bad day, or not. I know how I am when I'm stressed. But there were a lot of red flags as far as words and actions weren't lining up. So I think that for me was a major one. The next one was, like I said, it's just the complete and utter switch when the dynamic does change. People don't change like that overnight. It was too drastic. And the drastic switch put me personally into a panic. It was just like, oh my God, what did I do wrong? I don't understand what happened. So you have to really look at what you've done personally and been like, okay, there's nothing that I'm aware of that I've done that would cause this much of an upset, or that I would deserve this sort of treatment. And you can try to have a conversation with them about it, and you can try to see if they'll come up with anything. A lot of it will be very generalized, and a lot of it will send you in circles. And you'll find that the conversations are really confusing. They don't really go anywhere. So that's another thing to kind of keep aware of. And the other thing is, like, they'll kind of like randomly pull the rug out from underneath you. So you could be talking to, I'm trying to think of an example, like, so, all right, so right after my ex-husband, I met another man who unfortunately ended up being the same pattern, and I didn't see it. And it was weird because, like, there's no emotional component to them. Like they can't connect in that way. Everything is very surface level. So, you know, for me, we ended up taking this cross country drive together. And I was like, oh, this is going to be amazing, you know, connecting with this guy that I've been really, you know, crazy about for the last, you know, however long. And then when I would hear them explain the trip to other people, it was like, it wasn't, I can't wait to go on this trip with this girl. She's so amazing. I really like her. You know, I think we really connect. It was, oh, I've never been in cross country before. This will be a great opportunity for me. You know, and you're an opportunity, you're a thing, you add to their life, you have something that they want, and that's it. That's it. So they might wine and dine you and treat you well and, you know, kind of fluff your feathers until they get whatever it is they want that will feed their ego. You need to make them look good. That's all your purpose is for. It's raising their status, it's making them look good. The unfortunate part is too, is usually the shiny thing that attracts them to you is the first thing they'll try to dismantle as soon as you're together. Because the thing is they want somebody who they feel is on their level of, you know, a status or maybe above them or whatever. You have something that they admire and they want. But then as soon as they get you, they need to destroy that thing because you can't be above them. Nobody can be above them. So then they start whittling away. So as soon as you see little insults kind of sliding in or just cold behavior sliding in, you know, pay attention to it because it's a good chance it'll be a pattern. I know for the last one as well, he would do the trip stuff. But what was the other thing? Most recently, before I got out, we're all down at the pool, and one of the neighbors found out that I worked in TV. So they started talking to me about that, and they're asking me all these questions about locations and everything else. And now other people came over to listen to TV. Has a weird way of kind of drawing people in. So now they're asking me questions. And then I hear my ex say to one of our neighbors, oh yeah, I can't even get through an episode of that show without falling asleep. Like I just fast forward to her parts. And then there was other comment he made towards the end about it just being useless. And this is your partner in a group of people in public who are showing interest in you and what you're doing, and they have to undercut it or belittle it in front of everybody so that you feel smaller and people don't care as much. So it's a lot. It's not fun. And like I said, it can happen in friendships too. I've had it not just in romantic relationships. So it's definitely something to kind of try to be as aware as possible with it. But like I said, it's a sneaky thing for sure.
We have another question over here.
Okay.
Carly is making her way up to you.
Okay. Hi.
So when you realized that you were in these abusive relationships and you got out, how did you like tell your family and friends, and how like did telling them affect your relationship with them?
That's a great question.
Really good one. All right. So I was embarrassed. I'm somebody who's always considered myself as a strong person in general, but strong female as well. Like I grew up with the term in my day when I was younger was tomboy. I was a proud tomboy. I was very much a girl. I liked being a girl, but I liked doing boy things, and I hung out with the guys, and I would play basketball with the guys and fix cars with my dad. And like, I enjoy doing boy things. I work as a carpentry and flooring installer. So I was like, I always felt that I was a strong person in general. I never saw myself as the smartest person on the planet, but I also didn't see myself as somebody who was unintelligent either. So I didn't understand what was happening, and I didn't understand that I was in this pattern of being tricked, you know, and for the longest time, I didn't even know what it was. I didn't even know it was a thing. Like I said, like you aren't taught about this form of abuse, one, but two, I don't think narcissistic abuse has really come to light until like maybe the last 3 or 4 years. People really started talking about it. So I didn't even know it was a thing. So I know with the relationship that I was in that was physically abusive, I dealt with it. I was with that person for four months, I think. I dealt with 3 months of it alone until I finally broke down and talked to my parents, because it was one of those deals where it's like, well, this is embarrassing. And like, I got myself into this, I can get myself out. But that one ended up being too much to handle because the person broke into my house with me in it. And that was a mess. So yeah, I brought in my family. We went to the police. We ended up getting a restraining order. And then with the narcissistic abuse stuff, it was just like, I didn't understand what was going on for so long. I didn't understand that I was being abused. But like I said, towards the end, I was just in a constant daze of confusion. I had no will to live. I felt like I was erased. And the funny part is like, or sad part is even then I wasn't looking at it as like they're messed up, they're jerks, they're assholes or whatever. I was looking at it as like, clearly I've done something wrong. Clearly it's me. Like I wouldn't be getting treated this poorly if I hadn't done something wrong. So I remember being in bed in Australia. The last time I had found out he cheated shortly before I left, I was in bed for a week. I only got out to use the bathroom. I didn't shower. I didn't open the curtains. I think I didn't eat for about 2 or 3 days. And then after that, whatever I had was minimal, was barely drinking anything. The neighbors were coming to check on me because some of them knew what was going on. It was just bad. So now here I am overseas. I'm financially wiped out, completely under this person's control in that department, humiliated. You find out your person's been with 6 other people and you're the one dumb enough to marry them, so to speak. It was a lot. So it's funny because I ended up trying to find books, like how to fix me type of thing, and watching videos of what I'm doing wrong and attachment styles and all this stuff. And I ended up in a bookstore looking for a particular book and finding a different one by accident called Gaslighting by, I think it's Dr. Stephanie Starkis or something. And I was like, what the heck is gaslighting? What is that? Right. So I pick it up and I started flipping through it and I was like, this woman, I could have written this book, or I feel like this woman's been stalking my life for the last so many years. So gaslighting is just constantly creating confusion. It'd be like, you could say, oh, the sky is blue. And they're like, no, it's green. You're like, no, it's blue. No, it's green. You're wrong. It's green. It's not blue. It's green. It's always been green. So they constantly question your sanity. And they leave you in this place where you can't think straight. So much so that for me, I started losing my short-term memory. And my ex would laugh at me and say, you have the memory of a goldfish, and then would just start calling me goldfish for short, which would make it even worse. So by the time I came out to my parents, I read the book and it kept repeating over and over and over again, this is not going to get better, get out. This doesn't change. You can't fix it. Get out. That was the whole message in the book. Get out. These people do not change. They're not going to have a come to Jesus moment. It's not going to get any better. So then I kind of was like, my mom knew a little bit. So she was worried. They also isolate you. So I was kind of afraid to tell anybody, and I felt bad complaining because they were so far away. They couldn't do anything really. Luckily I left one credit card open to buy a ticket home that I didn't tell him I had. And I remember calling my parents and I was telling them what was going on, and there was not one bit of judgment. There was not one bit of you're foolish. It was just like, enough is enough, come home. Like, you don't deserve this, come home. You shouldn't be putting up with this, come home. And I think part of the problem there too is that, I don't know about you guys, but so I'm 41. My parents are going on 40. Well, no, they just hit 42 years of marriage. So I came from a family where my parents are married, my grandparents are both sides are married over 50 years. You know, you hear over and over again, marriage is hard, marriage takes work, it takes effort, like people change and you have to figure out how to like change together as soon as you feel this, you know, becoming a divide or whatever. So I didn't understand what hard meant. How hard should it be? How much should I tolerate? How much should I put up with? How much compromise should there be? But then when you really look at the compromise part of a relationship with the narcissist, the only part of compromise is either you're doing what they want or you're not doing what they want. And if you're not doing what they want, they will get rid of you and they'll find somebody else who will fill that void until they get sick of what they're doing. Or they put up with it and allow them to just kind of have free range. But family wasn't judgmental at all. They were very helpful. They're really quick to take me in. You know, I was very, very fortunate in that way. It's hard to not be embarrassed because you've been had on so many levels. And I think that's the hardest part is, you know, I've tried to describe this to people before and they're like, you're not supposed to get into a relationship to change somebody. And I was like, that's not what this is. You get into a relationship and you fall for a complete and utter fraud, so to speak. Like what they put out there and what they make you fall for is not real, was never real, never existed. It only exists to draw people in. And once you're in, you get the monster that was kind of hiding behind the mask. So I think that's the hardest part to deal with is trying to explain that to other people that I wasn't trying to change this person. I just wanted what I was sold. So you'll have some people that look at you a little crazy. They don't get it. But fortunately, yeah, my parents and my family and friends were very supportive because they knew what I was going through to some degree or another. There were a few people that I was talking to as things were happening. Yeah.
Trying to explain people like this to others. A lot of times, what I sort of say is that they don't have their own emotions themselves. Everything is just a show. Basically, they're like an actor or actress, and they don't have a personality of their own. So they only exist in as much as what they're doing with other people and to other people. So it's like they have their own interests or their own things that are important to them other than just their act. So, you know, so to speak. And it's who they are. Who they are is that they don't have a them.
Yeah.
It's a good way to sort of explain it to people.
Yeah. They're like an empty slate. They just kind of take on who you are long enough to grab you. But they'll use normal emotion against you. They can mimic it to some degree. But it feels empty and it feels really hollow when they do it. So I remember the first time I caught on to it with my ex-husband, I caught him for the last time with the cheating. And I remember sitting in bed with like leaning up against the headboard and he's sitting at the end of the bed. And he's like, I feel so horrible. Oh. You know, it was the acting of sad and acting embarrassed, but there were no real tears. There was no real emotion. It was like watching a bad actor. And it was, I remember feeling like very out of my body at that point, like kind of watching it, like my head couldn't, it's like, okay, his face is doing one thing, but like or his whole demeanor is doing one thing. But then if you really look at their face, you can tell they're not feeling anything. They're just kind of going through the motions, looking upset so that you feel bad for them. And then with my ex-boyfriend, he was not rattled over anything emotional. The only time I saw him sincerely cry was when his dog was put down. But beyond that, like it was very weird because in April we had a massive fight and he came in to me crying, and I was just like, and I was upset because it just seemed like every time we got into a fight, there was no emotion from him. Like he just didn't care. And I'm like, what is with you? Like it didn't slap me on the head then. I'm like, what is going on? Like you just don't seem to care if I'm here, or I'm not here, or like, what is, I don't get it. So he came in crying and I was totally thrown for a loop. And he's like, I feel like you feel better when I cry. And I'm just looking at him like, well, okay, so now I know you can cry on a dime and it's just being used. Like, just, what the hell is happening? So it took me a while. And with him, it was funny as well, because a lot of their friends are very surface level. You know, they don't get into too much detail. They don't really want to know what's going on in your life. They don't know how to react to anything too emotional. Everything's kind of like, you know, surface happy, like things are fantastic and amazing. And the two things that caught my attention with him is one was his friend, and the other one that just popped into my head and went right back out. Hopefully I'll come back. We were out with this friend in LA, and he said that he was a really good friend from college and all this stuff. And I was like, wow, a really good friend that's a guy. Because most of his friends were girls too, which I found odd at the time. But we go out to meet this really good friend and really good friend's girlfriend. And, you know, we headed back to their house for some drinks afterwards. And she drove her car home and he drove with us so we wouldn't get lost. And on the drive, he's telling us about their relationship and how they hit a really rough patch. And I'm thinking, this is a normal conversation for close friends. And he's like, you know, we had this big conversation about what we both need and what we need from each other. And it was very direct. And ever since then, things have been really good. And I was like, wow, you know, we just went through that ourselves. So, you know, since then, things have been pretty good. Well, later that night, my ex was like, well, it was really weird how quick he was to divulge what's going on in their relationship. And I'm looking at him like, you've been telling me you guys are really good friends. So I don't find that weird at all. Like he had 2 seconds to talk to you in kind of a private setting. And he was probably trying to figure out or bounce off us what we're experiencing because we've been together about the same amount of time. I didn't find it strange at all. But for him, he felt it was oversharing and it was weird. I was just like, okay. They're just, oh, that was the other thing too, is when I started picking up on it with this last round, I noticed the emotion, the play of emotion, how everything was kind of, it was his way or no way. But then I was like, he doesn't have any real friends, like sincerely real close friends. He has a lot of acquaintances. He has a lot of surface level friends. He's like the life of the party, but he has nobody that he talks to about real stuff. So I remember sitting there and I said to him, like, do you have a best friend? Which sounds like an odd question, especially when you're in your 40s, but he just kind of looked at me. He's like, yeah, I do. My brother. I'm like, no, 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 not like family, like a friend who is like family. Do you have a best friend? And he's like, no, no, not really. And I remember the lights starting to go on in my head. I'm like, oh my God, I've done it again. I've done it again. And it was going back and matching up all the actions again, like getting belittled on a daily basis. You know, one example was a lot of us ladies, I can't speak for everybody, but we like our trash TV, right? Your 90-day fiancés and your married at first sights. And then you also like your ID and your murder channel, which I don't know why we do, but we do. So I'd be watching whatever I was watching while I was working downstairs because we both work from home. And every time you come downstairs for a snack or water or whatever, it's like, oh, you're watching trash. You're watching trash. This is beneath you. You shouldn't be watching this. It's horrible. It's trash. It's trash. Every day I would listen to this. Every day I'd wait for the comments. Every day I'd be, you know, it was relentless. So I turned the TV off one day. I just wasn't watching anything. And then he comes downstairs and he's like, why aren't you watching your shows? And I'm like, because every time I watch my shows, you come down here and I have to listen to how what I watch is stupid and unintelligent and trash. And then he looked like he felt kind of bad, but I don't know that he felt bad. I think it was just more or less I called him on it and he realized he was doing it. So he's like, oh, well, I don't want you to feel like you can't watch TV. And I was like, okay. So he put it on and went back upstairs. And then in one of our last fights, he said, well, I don't like the TV that you watch. It's trash and it's a reflection of your intelligence. And I was just like, okay, okay, all right. So it's personal attacks. It's making you feel less than. And yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot. I don't know if anybody has questions, or Jeff, did you have?
Yeah, I was gonna say, if anybody has questions they wanted to share. I know everybody had some ready, but maybe there's something you came up with or something. Yeah, Rose, you're gonna take the lead. You got Rose coming at you.
Okay.
I don't know why I'm doing this, running this like it's a morning show.
You're okay. Hey.
Like narcissistic behavior like ever stem from their childhood or like parents, or did they even like ever tell you about their childhood or parents?
I'm sorry, I missed that.
Did like this person's childhood or parents like affect their narcissistic behavior, or like did they ever tell you anything about their childhood?
So with my most recent ex, he didn't tell me anything. I met his parents, and his father was very dominating and out there and loud, and um they kind of didn't treat me the best. His mother was very quick to correct me on things, as far as like loading a dishwasher and stuff that we all know how to do growing up. So I kind of would just suck it up and be like, it's her house, it's her space. So I'm just going to kind of do things her way. But also when you have that sort of personality, like you're trying to be polite because you're in somebody else's environment, but at the same time, if you're very quick to just mold yourself into whatever the other person wants, you kind of leave yourself susceptible to this as well if you don't ever stand your ground. So I think part of it might have been learned with his parents, especially his dad. His dad, I think his mom's been dealing with it probably as well, and is just kind of used to it. The other relationship, his parents were the best part of that relationship for me. I considered them parents. They were very nice, they were friendly, they were welcoming, they were funny. Like we both grew up in like lower middle class. So there was a lot of common kind of, growing up experiences there. But his father did have kind of like an air of being important. You know what I mean? He always treated me very well. But I know that he had cheated on his wife at one point. But that wasn't discovered until my ex was like in his 30s. It was later in life. And at that point, I was one of many women had already been put through the ringer with him. So I'm not entirely sure. I think Jeff would know more about that as far as the makings with the family, possibly. But I considered my ex-husband's family like family. They're the only thing that made me feel normal and made me feel like I was part of a family, and then that I was appreciated. I mean, the first time I found out he had cheated and there was a complete and utter meltdown, and I left. I threw his ring back at him, the whole lot. But I couldn't leave the country because of visa status things that I was trying to figure out what to do. So I was out in a hotel, and she was just very quick to contact me and just say how sorry she was. And, his father didn't talk to him for a few weeks. It was a mess. And I think part of the reason why I stayed around is I cared for them so much. And it was just like, I didn't understand how he could have behaved the way he did when he grew up in what to me seemed like a very similar family life. But I think there was probably something a little bit there with his dad. And I know there was definitely something there with my ex's dad, but I don't know how that works on kids. But it's funny how parents don't see it. Like, my ex-husband's mom was very apologetic, and she just felt like something happened in the military that changed him. Like, she couldn't wrap her head around what was going on. But really for her, I think the veil was kind of being lifted, and she was getting a look at her son on a side of her son that she had never seen before. And, at this point, he's like late 30s and he hadn't lived at home since he was like 18 or 19 before he went off with the military. So there was a good chunk of time where she didn't get to see how he was with people, but also how they are with their romantic partners or their very close friends is very different than how they handle everybody else. A lot of people, if you point this person out, like if you're like, that's it, I'm calling them out, they're jerks, they put me through the ringer, people will look at you like you're crazy because they're such good people. They're upstanding citizens, and they're so good at their job, and they're very intelligent, and they're funny, and they're charismatic, and you just look like you're insane because now you've been put through the ringer, and any little thing will rattle you. It's especially true with therapy. I remember one of the things that was used against me was therapy with my ex-husband. I had never been before, and he suggested we go. I think for him, it was like a last ditch effort of like, look at me fixing myself, and it was pretty much, you should want to fix yourself too. I'm trying to fix the relationship. You should want to fix it. And I'm like, you cheated on me. Like, if you wanted this relationship to work, maybe you shouldn't have done that. But it was then put back in my lap of, if you really wanted this, you would try to work on it. So now we're in therapy, and I am completely and utterly emotionally shot, completely mentally rattled. Any little thing is going to set me off. Well, he's now sitting there calm, cool, and collected, looking like the upstanding military guy who knows exactly what to say to get me to spin out. Luckily, the lady that we were working with could kind of see through it, which was good. But there's a lot of times you'll go and see counselors in the situation, especially in a couples session, where they don't pick up on it. I know my most recent ex had gone to therapy with his ex-wife, and it was pretty much turned into a her problem. So they're not always able to catch it.
I'm sitting over here. You can't actually see me, but I'm like shaking my head and nodding my head and stuff, because the things that you're saying, you literally could be. I have a close friend who has gone through all the same stuff, and your stories are almost identical. So, as I'm explaining to everybody here, this is the symptoms, the problem, the issue. It's all really, it's very common. So it's not common, but what you experienced are what other people in the same scenario are experiencing. So, you're not crazy. Somebody else who is starting to understand about it, realize you are not crazy. This is what happened.
Yeah. It was funny because she ended up calling me after a few sessions, and she's like, I just need you to understand. It was kind of a weird scenario because so we're both seeing somebody separately, but they didn't have enough staff. So his counselor asked if she could be our marriage counselor too, as a double. And she's like, typically we wouldn't do this. And I was like, actually, no, I'd prefer it because you've been working with him for a little while now. And like, maybe with us together, you can see something that I'm missing because I don't understand what's happening. And I'm like, you've at least have had some time with them. And she's like, okay. So when we did maybe 3 sessions, after the third, he decided he was done. He told her, he didn't tell me, that he wasn't going to keep going. He decided he was fixed. So basically, it wasn't that he was fixed. He just decided he did enough to make it look like he tried and that he did his part, and he doesn't need any more fixing because there's nothing wrong with him. So the counselor called me because now she's technically our couples as well, not just his. And she's like, I just want you to know he's decided he's fixed and there's nothing, wrong with him. And she's like, I would disagree. I think that coming in would be good for him, that we can't force him. And then she was just saying that, I need you to understand this isn't you. This isn't something you've done. This is not something you deserve. This isn't you. You haven't, this isn't you. I don't know how many times she said this isn't you, and it just wasn't sinking in. Like, I think she was trying to warn me it might be a good idea to get out. But it just wasn't sinking in. I was in such a bad place at that point. But they're very cookie cutter. But it's funny because even though they're cookie cutter, it's like I said, that the last one just after my marriage, he completely snuck by me. But I was talking to you about this the other day, Jeff, with COVID. When COVID slid in, not to get into how serious or not serious or whatever, he was more on it's deadly serious, and I'm on the side of like, well, we need more information. Like, but because he was in it's very serious, everything needs to lock down. Now I'm locked down. Now I'm isolated. Now I'm running by his rules, and I'm not fully understanding at that point what should or shouldn't be normal because it's COVID and nobody knew what should be normal. So I think a lot of his behavior was kind of like swept away for the reason of living under some weird thing for 2 years and not really knowing how anybody should react under that. So it wasn't until things started lifting and things didn't change, or they were getting worse, or they were getting more insulting, or they were getting more hurtful, that things started kind of registering in my head like, I did it again. Like I've done it again. This is the same person. Unfortunately, COVID was able to hide a lot of it. And it is funny, not funny. During that whole stretch of time, there was a lot of talk about how the rise of domestic abuse was kind of going through the roof because people were home more and having to deal with their partners. And maybe you're seeing sides of people that you wouldn't normally see because you'd be at work or doing whatever. But they're very cookie cutter. They operate in very similar ways. It's usually anytime I talk to somebody who's been through it, it's just amazing. It's amazing how similar the experiences are.
Start back up. What other questions you guys have, Kris? Have you experienced anything? Have you seen anything that kind of this is resonating? I'm curious about. Oh yeah. Sydney, this is very special. I don't think I have heard Sydney speak. This is terrific. I'm so excited.
Hi.
Hi, my name is Sydney. I wanted to know, like, when you saw the switch between you and him, did you ever think, like, down the road it was starting to become a normal thing?
Yeah, it's really weird because you almost get used to the highs and lows, and you live in a constant state of like internal panic, so to speak. So it's like really, really good. It's everything you ever wanted. Like the relationship's amazing, and then crash. You're being treated horribly. You're being called names. You're nothing. You're worthless. Yanks right back up. You're amazing. You're wonderful. You're fantastic. The relationship couldn't be any better. And then it crashes. There's no in between usually. It's usually highs and lows, highs and lows. You're living from one to the next, high or low. Your whole body is on alert at all times, and it's exhausting. And those few times in between where it's just quiet, you're panicking even more because you're waiting for the next thing. You're not really sure if it's going to be high. You're not really sure if it's going to be low. And you're just in a constant state of alert. And unfortunately, that constant state of alert does become quote unquote normal. It becomes like a constant just state of what you're used to living in. And when you finally do remove yourself from it, I found I had a really hard time with new people. And like I said, when I first started with my most recent ex, he was in his mirroring, love bombing, everything's fantastic stage. So anytime he did something nice to me, I would internally brace for the slap, like the emotional slap, the mental slap, whatever the slap would be. And it wouldn't come. So at that time, because like I said, it was early on. So then it was just kind of like, it was just weird. Like people couldn't just be nice to me. Like if they were nice to me or they're polite or whatever, and I would just be bracing for some sort of assault of sorts, obviously not a physical one, but the assault against my character, assault against my personality, being told I'm unintelligent, being told I'm unattractive, being whatever it is. I was waiting for whatever that was, finding out they were cheating, finding out they weren't cheating. But that's the thing too, like, so it does become normal, for your question. Absolutely. It shouldn't become normal. Unfortunately, because there's not enough people that understand how this whole thing works. If you find yourself somebody who gets stuck in the swamp of it, yes, it becomes very normal, unfortunately, and you feel like you deserve it for some reason. Clearly, I've done something wrong to deserve this. And it's very hard to get out of for that reason. Like, once you find yourself in that mindset. There was somewhere I was going to go with that, and I just completely spaced. But yeah, I mean, it's a lot to deal with. And like I said earlier, it's not just romantic relationships. You can deal with bosses like this that keep you in a constant state of fear of being fired over nothing, who talk badly about you, who put your work down, who take credit for your work. You can deal with it in friendships. I had a friendship where this person was great, but anytime there was some weird angle of competition that could be entered into a place that I didn't see it, I would get steamrolled, and then I'd be left wondering, like, what the hell just happened? Like, where did this come from? Example, I can think of 2 examples actually for the friendship level stuff. I remember myself and 2 girls were out. We got dressed up. We went out to a bar. And there was this guy at the bar. I'm originally from New England, so there's a kid at the bar. We started talking. He's wearing a Red Sox hat. I was like, fantastic. So we start joking around, and back home, very sarcastic. If we're not picking on you, we don't like you. That's kind of just how it works. So we're kind of giving each other a hard time. And he went to go use the bathroom. Now, my friend at the time, she had no interest in him. Like, she was looking at him like he was below all of us at the table. She was just being really rude. And I'm like, what is going on? Like, so he goes to use the bathroom, and she comes over to me and she's like, do you like him? And I was like, yeah, he's really cool. He's nice. Like, we're from the same area, same sense of humor, whatever. Like, yeah, he's cool. She's like, oh. So when the kid came back, she just about sat in his lap, pulled his hat off, starts running her fingers through the hair, super flirt. So I'm sitting there like, what in the hell just happened? Like, what is going on right now? And then the other friend that was with us came up to me, and she's like, didn't she just ask you if you liked this guy? And I was like, yeah. She's like, what did you say? And I was like, I said I did. And she was just in shock. Like, it was just so out there. But I was surprised she actually had done it in front of somebody, because usually that stuff was done where nobody really understood that you just been slighted or insulted. Usually they're a little stealthier about it. But yeah, I've had situations like that happen a lot. It's always about benefiting them. They need to be the center of attention. They need to have all eyes on them, and anything that detracts from that, they will beat down in kind of a slick way. But again, if there's something about you and your personality or something you have that attracts them to you, they want it. They want you. And then as soon as you're kind of in their little world, then they try to beat you down so you're not above them. So your star needs to shine, but not too brightly, pretty much. And then the funny thing about that too is once they do dismantle you and you're no longer what you were in the beginning, they punish you for it without taking any responsibility for the fact that they're a big reason why you're no longer like you were.
I was just gonna make a point on that. I'm trying to remember what it was. Shoot. Oh, I know what it was. So one of the other things that I think is sort of interesting about this too is, like, you might think that these narcissistic personalities would be drawn towards very dependent, needy people. But it's actually the opposite. It's a lot of times they, like Kris was saying, they really like the attention and the ability and the challenge of somebody who is dynamic, as long as it never outshines them. But it's, I think that's one of the other reasons why it's hard to see, is because a lot of times, people that wind up in these relationships are themselves strong, dynamic people. And it's hard to imagine that they are feeling in prison with another person, because they just don't strike you as the type of person that would be. So I think that's an interesting, thing that makes it that much more difficult.
Yeah, I think part of it too is if you're naturally a very honest person, you unfortunately will put a little too much out that they can work with and that they could use against you. If you're somebody who wouldn't naturally go out of your way to manipulate somebody, you might not think that other people act in that way either, or you might not expect them to, unfortunately. So there is a little bit of naive on my end and on the other girls' ends that I've met with. Unfortunately, it shouldn't be considered naive, because you shouldn't have to expect people to be behaving like this. But I'm finding the behavior is more and more common than we realize. It's just there's never really been a name kind of attached to it, or we've never been taught to look out for it. But yeah, if when I found out about the other girls, I felt so insanely stupid. And like I said, I never felt like I was an Einstein or anything, but I never considered myself somebody who was unintelligent either. I felt so dumb. I felt so dumb. And then I felt like, well, I must deserve this somehow, because I wouldn't do this to anybody on purpose. So clearly I had to have done something wrong. And rather than just being like, no, excuse my language, this person is just an asshole. Like, this is just them. This is how they function. It was me looking at me thinking I did something wrong. So I think that's where in me, there's something broken that I need to fix. So I stopped drawing these people in. But the other ladies, when I talked to them, they were very smart. One of them also worked in the military. She dealt with organizing logistics and all that with, different pieces of equipment. She lived on her own. She was raising her kid on her own. She was not stupid. She was not weak. Like the other woman that I met, same deal, very smart, very nice. And I think a lot of us were just kind of not expecting people to treat us in a way that we wouldn't treat them. And that can get you into a lot of trouble. And I think that was one of the hardest things I learned, because after I came home from my ex-husband, I was seeing a counselor for a while. And she's like, you got to realize that the rules that you operate by aren't the rules everybody operates by. And what might be considered common sense, as far as you don't cheat on your husband or wife, like you aren't supposed to lie. You aren't supposed to, just cheat in life in general, and you're not supposed to manipulate. A lot of people will follow these rules, but when it comes to a narcissist, there are no rules. Like they don't have to live by any normal rule in society. They don't hold themselves to it. All bets are off. So it's just like the more you are to be a type that follows the rules, the more kind of open you are, the more relatively honest you are. Unfortunately, those things that are usually considered strength of someone's character can be used against them pretty quickly. So then you kind of have to figure out how to reel yourself in, not to put so much out, be a lot more aware of who you're communicating with, get to know them better before you give them too much of yourself. And it was funny because I swear to God, they've got like, I don't know, sense of smell for this, because when I came home from my ex-husband, an ex I had when I was younger, it was the same pattern. It was like within days he texted me, and they always cycle around. like you'll get rid of the person or they'll leave you for no reason, and all of a sudden months or years down the track they'll be like, hey, how you doing, to see if they can pull you back in, or if you're going to be like, dude, I'm not dealing with this again. So they'll keep cycling back. You bore them, they get rid of you, they find somebody else, that person bores them, they come back to you if they think that you're going to leave that door open. You bore them again, they're off to somebody else, they cycle back. As long as they think that there's a door open, they'll keep coming back. So when I just broke up with my recent ex, about 2 weeks before then, I had somebody reach out to me that I worked with in the past. It was really kind of odd. I hadn't heard from the person in forever. And this is something you really need to like pay attention to, because this is one thing that I realized I was getting hung up on like within the last few months. I realized it. So when you first meet them, or it's like this person, I knew them and I worked with them, but I didn't know them. Like we didn't know each other. We knew each other on a work level, but that was it. So they come in and they're like, oh, I'd like to take you out to lunch. And I was like, well, like I just got out of a relationship. Like, oh, okay, all right. But I think you're amazing. I think you're the best thing I've ever met. I think you've got everything that I've ever wanted in a woman. Marriage this and kids that. And it was just I was on a mile high pedestal from the second we started talking. And my brain there was like a little alert going off, like, this is way too familiar. Like naturally, we all want to think we're a good person, right? We're a good catch. Like we've got something to offer people, and you want to be appreciated, and you'd like to be noticed as a good person, and you'd like to have somebody put you on a bit of a pedestal of sorts. Like you want that from your partner. But if somebody is giving you that instantly for no reason at all, that is when you should really be on high alert. And I said to them, because he kept throwing out perfect. I'm like, listen, we've worked together, so we know each other. I'm like, but we don't actually know each other. We haven't actually hung out. Like, you don't know anything about me. I go, nobody's perfect. And he's like, oh, I know nobody's perfect, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, no, like, but you don't know me. There's no reason why you should be putting me this high up on a pedestal. Like, it doesn't make sense. So then he kind of backed off a bit and he turned it around on me, and he's like, oh, well, I'm not really looking for anything serious right now. I'm just saying that, we should be friends. And if something goes somewhere, it's like, but you were just talking about marriage and kids, how perfect I was everything you were looking for. And now that I've kind of called you on it, I'm crazy and you're just looking for a friendship. That doesn't make sense. So it's just anybody who puts you on an insanely high pedestal, the only place you have to go is down. If somebody starts you way up here for no reason, they're going to knock you off of it, because the problem is they're looking at you. You have something they want. They've built some sort of story in their head around you, or some sort of image in their head of what they expect you to be. So you're up on that pedestal with that expectation because of whatever drew them into you. And then as soon as you don't live up to it, they're going to knock you right off of it, or they're going to want to tear it down anyways, because again, you cannot be above them. You cannot outshine them. So it's just be aware of overly friendly people. If you are in, if you're in a space with somebody who's a good person, they're not going to not bother with you because you're being smart and you're protecting yourself and you're taking time to get to know them. Most people are going to want to do that. So if you kind of put the brakes on, they're not going to be insulted and they're not going to turn it around on you. So that's definitely one to be aware of, because that's one that I kept getting stuck in.
Man, I feel like I could do this like all day. We are like just about out of time for class, but I definitely want to say thank you so much. I know this is, you put yourself out there. This is super vulnerable, giving really wonderful advice and sharing your story. And I mean, if you don't know somebody yet who's been in it, you're going to know somebody, and hopefully you're not the one. So it's really nice that people like you are out here kind of sharing your story and talking about what to look for, what kinds of red flags. So I can't thank you enough. And I think I can probably, speak for the room when we say, we really appreciate you coming in and talking, and it's terrific.
No problem. I mean, like I said, you're gonna run into things in life that you're gonna be embarrassed about, but you gotta learn to reach out to people you can trust who've always been there, and they've always been a solid support. Because unfortunately, I think today too, I don't know how old you guys are, but I'm assuming I'm probably double your age for most of you. When we grew up, we didn't have the internet. And I honestly feel that like a lot of this social media, everything else is kind of made whatever this is worse. So it's just, you just gotta just be careful, just protect yourself and trust your gut. If there's something in you that is just kind of screaming, even if it's dully in the back of your head that something's not adding up, kind of take a step back, talk to some people, and you can never really be too careful these days, because you meet one wrong person, it can set you off course, and it is a lot. It can be a lot to come back from, but I do promise it's much better to jump and deal with having to fix things than to stay in that kind of a mess, because it will destroy you. But, yeah, happy subject for early morning.
Hey, it needs to be talked about, so that's a good thing. So thank you so much, and as always, it's a pleasure. And I'll go back to sleep, or I guess,
Yes.
or start like now that you've got a head of steam for the day, you can.
Yeah. Sounds good. All right. Thank you guys.
Thank you so much.
Bye.